Welcome back to the Rich Eisen Show. His Football Morning in America Monday column on Pro Football Talk and NBC Sports is a must-read, as it has been for decades. He's our friend Peter King back here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Peter?
Everything is going okay, Rich. How about you?
I'm doing fine. Everybody happy and healthy in your world?
Oh, relatively speaking.
Okay.
I mean, it's I'm in Brooklyn. I'm sort of in the belly of the beast.
Right.
We're all alive, and we're all staying safe and basically being as careful as we can be. And we're all very healthy, but thank you.
Knocking on wood for that. Okay, Peter, you and I spoke last week. You gave me a call at the end of last week, or we connected for your Monday column about the draft and what it may look like. Based on where things are right now, what do you think the NFL draft looks like for later on next month? We can't wait to turn the page to April. What do you got for me on that front?
Well, one of the things that, and again, I don't know who pays attention to what, but one of the things I thought that was lost in whatever discussion there was of the scene I set for the draft in my column, which I believe will be either at a very barren ESPN studio in Bristol, Connecticut, because obviously Gavin Newsom is not letting NFL Network open up, and Phil Murphy, the governor of New Jersey, is not going to let NFL Films open up. New York is certainly not going to be open at that time, and there's a chance that ESPN could be open, and this could be time when, and who knows, maybe you will be a part of this for NFL Network. Maybe this will just be ESPN, but ESPN might have 3 or 4 people on a barren set at ESPN, and then a bunch of people essentially on on their in-home cameras. Or, as you and I discussed, it could also be Rich Eisen in his home in California, hosting it and kicking it out to Kurt Warner in Arizona and everybody everywhere else. Ian Rappaport, wherever he is in New York, so. But I do think that, and you raised this point because I asked about it. I said, look, there's a real chance that Roger Goodell could host this draft from his home in Bronxville, New York. And there is a real chance that could happen. But I think as far as teams go, I think what we're seeing with teams is they really are waiting to hear from the NFL if their facilities will be open, so that maybe 4 or 5 people per team could be available to use their facilities. Now, a lot of people might say, well, geez, why can't everybody just get together for each team by Zoom or by conference call or something? Well, they can, and they might, but I was in the San Francisco 49ers draft room in 2017 for their entire draft process of the new staff: John Elway, Kyle Shanahan, Adam Peters, Parag Marathe, who obviously was a holdover there, their business and cap guy. And they must have spent over $1 million totally revamping the technology in their draft room. It's amazing how much knowledge you could get up on any player in the draft. Okay. And obviously, if you do that, everybody sitting in their homes or whatever, it's going to be difficult to do that. You're not going to be able to take advantage of it. So everybody in the NFL wants to be even a very skeleton crew at their facility, but they have to prepare in another way because Roger Goodell has made it clear. If all 32 teams are not allowed to be in their facility on April 23rd, 24, and 25, then none of the 32 will be able to be allowed in their facility, and they'll all have to make alternative plans.
So is this like a dual track process for teams right now? It's like depending on and by when do you know is the call made?
You know what, Rich? I literally just talked to John Elway 15 minutes ago.
Yeah.
About this, and he said in essence that we're hopeful of getting in our facility and we're making plans otherwise if we can't. So I think all 32 teams are in the exact same boat. I'm sure that Roger Goodell will make that ruling he's going to have to do it, I would say, at the very least, like a week before the draft, because teams are going to have to figure out a way to get the plans for the draft. And let's just say you might draft CD Lamb. Okay, everyone is going to have either an IT person make it possible for them to call up every bit of information they have in their organization on CD Lamb, every scouting report, everything, so that when they're in the process of discussing, hey, what are we doing here? Or in their final draft meetings, the few days before the draft, they're all going to have to find some way to get, if not on exactly the same page, close to the same page.
Yeah, I mean, the internet technology community in the NFL right now is at a premium, clearly, almost as important as the actual scouting information, just trying to house it in a way to make it as close to what these teams are used to. Peter King here on the Rich Eisen Show, and you had Mickey Loomis on your podcast, him saying how he'd be personally in favor of delaying the draft, which went all sorts of viral. Certainly it landed, as it appears, as with a thud on the desk of Commissioner Roger Goodell. I'm wondering where all that sentiment resides right now in the NFL community.
Well, I think there's a lot of people, a lot of front office people, GM types, who were not happy with Roger Goodell, because this was not a time, in my opinion, to be relatively autocratic, which Roger Goodell was. This was a time to come out and say, hey, look, we understand this is a tough time for all general managers in this league, for all scouts in this league. Because, Rich, right now, this week, quite literally, starting on March 30th, is when several teams in this league, and I think it's probably more than several, we're going to start like 2 weeks of draft meetings in which they would finalize their board. They'd get their board finished. And now they haven't been able to do anything out of a sense of normalcy for the last month. And now, clearly, nothing is going to be normal over the next 3 weeks before the draft. And I think sometimes, Roger Goodell has gotten more and more removed from a lot of sort of the common people in the league recently. This is the NFL's 100th season. He was absolutely invisible all year. Nobody saw him. If he made 5 public appearances, I can't even name them. But normally, Roger Goodell is a guy who, in his tenure, when he goes to a game, he walks through the parking lot sometimes or speaks to some fan groups or whatever. And it's possible he did this year in abundance. I certainly didn't hear about very much of it. And look, whatever you think of the job he did or whatever, in my opinion, had I been advising Roger Goodell, I would have said, hey, pick up the phone, call Mickey Loomis, call 10 general managers and say, hey, I know this is tough. Or have a conference call with them and say, hey, I'm sorry, I feel for you guys. This is a hard way to go, but we got to do this draft. Now, could he have reached out to a couple, 3, 4, 5? I have not heard of that, and maybe he could have. But in my opinion, one of the reasons that a lot of general managers and football people in the league feel enmity right now toward the league office is they feel like they're not listened to.
Well, we're kind of recreating the conversation you and I had on the phone last week, where I heard that and I'm like, wow, I didn't really consider all that, because I'm just talking about where I am from my chair, talking to fans and hearing from fans, and where I would be in my chair for a draft. I know you mentioned how it would be maybe an ESPN only event that would be over a lot of people at the NFL networks, if you will. There would be an issue. I think
dead bodies.
Well, I don't want to use that word, obviously, in this day and age. But you know what I'm saying? Like, it would be very difficult for all of us to handle all that. But these are unique times, man. Like, and that's what I said. With all the scouts and the general managers, and I know that they're not doing it the way that they normally would do it, and I understand their livelihoods are on the line if they don't get it right, usually. But if things are in this country necessary for the fans to get some form of a distraction, what 3-day event could there possibly be at all in the sports world that comes remotely close to this? I mean, we're talking about a Jordan documentary being something to celebrate, being moved up by 2 months. So, we talk about adversity in the third and the fourth quarters and how you have to adapt, and you have maybe it's time for the scouting and general manager departments to adapt and do it.
They are, Rich.
Right?
And I believe that, I talked to like 4 or 5 of them this weekend, and nobody is bitching and moaning right now. It's simply, and I don't mean, oh, you poor guys, and give them a pat on the back. I just mean, talk to them, talk to them, show a little bit of empathy. And just this league office has not been able to do that. And again, maybe they've done it behind closed doors. It's possible, but it's certainly not anything that I've heard about.
Peter King here on the Rich Eisen Show. All right, let's get to other aspects of the business that the commissioner is sitting right in the middle of, and that is the owners' meeting that would have happened and the rules of the NFL. Is pass interference? Where's that situation right now, Peter?
Rich, what's really interesting? I heard this weekend that they have not gotten into the nuts and bolts of what they want to do with pass interference because the competition committee knew that there was not going to be a vote on this week.
Okay.
And so their whole feeling is we have a bunch of things we need to do now that, quite frankly, are more important than the clarification of this rule. So the competition committee is going to take all of this up in the coming weeks, and then there's going to be a resolution on it before the May meetings. Now, most likely, the May meetings will also be virtual because the competition committee meetings are going to be virtual. They held some last week, but they basically realized that we don't really have time to get everybody involved in this right now. Obviously, there's a lot of these things that the coaches want to be involved in heavily and want to be heard. And so I think they all felt like this is something that's going to be better done, in the weeks before the May meetings, especially because now there was going to be no way that they were going to come to any sort of resolution with everything else they have going on.
So then what are the votes that they do have in front of them? Are they television related, schedule related?
Television, and how exactly, just confirming what exactly will be done with the extra 2 playoff teams.
Right.
Okay, so as everybody knows, playoff thing goes up from 12 teams to 14, one additional one per conference. Almost certainly the seeding will remain exactly the same. You will not reseed after every thing. After every round,
Right.
Basically, it is going to be very simply playoffs as usual. With the I'm hearing with the exception of now, there's only going to be one team with a bye. And so obviously it's 2 versus 7, 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5, or 4 versus 5. There's 2 other little things. Which TV networks get the games?
Right.
That's one thing. And then the final thing is just confirming that this is going to be 3 wild card games on Saturday, 3 on Sunday.
Unbelievable.
Which is how my understanding is that's what will be announced later today. But there is a chance, Rich, in the future, in future years of this CBA, that they will experiment with a Monday night game in Wild Card Weekend. Because if you think about it, the amount of people who would watch Monday at 8:15 versus Saturday at 1:05,
right,
is, I think it could be double the audience.
I agree. It's not even close. But then there's the issue of whoever wins that game would have to play a game on Sunday the following week. You can't go Monday to Saturday. I mean, that would be such a competitive disadvantage.
But here's the thing. Here's what I would say about that. If you're going on a short week after playing the previous Sunday,
right,
to play on Saturday, okay, and also to play the early game on Saturday. You're playing at 1:05 p.m. because that's the game that would be eliminated in a 2-3-1 situation. 2 Saturday, 3 Sunday, 1 Monday. So how big of a difference, honestly, is it to have a short week afternoon game, in week one of in the division round versus
Right.
winning that game and having a short week game the following Sunday?
Any chance that
I really don't think it's that big a deal.
Any chance that ownership just comes out and says whichever happens, 1:00 on Saturday or 4:30 on Saturday, the Texans get that game regardless because that's the way it goes? Is that possible? Do they actually make a rule? That's a new league
rule.
If the Texans make it.
They play a playoff game on Wild Card Weekend at 3:35 Central.
Has to be. Must.
It's a league rule.
It is.
That's what they're voting on.
They should
today.
just make it. They should just codify it, Peter, and be done with it. Right.
Poor J.J. Watt.
Yeah, I know.
He'll never play a primetime playoff game in his life.
Pretty much. I know we talk about it all the time.
Yeah, that's a running joke.
All right, last one for you, Peter, before I let you go. The markets for Cam Newton and Jameis Winston, do you think they get signed before the draft? I think they got to see how that goes, and then we'll see how it goes after that, right? Right now?
My gut feeling is the only team that might sign one of them before the draft is Jacksonville. And quite honestly, Rich, Jacksonville, because, hey, look, you think and I think we all think that because Tom Telesco and the Chargers are really a heavy draft and develop team, I keep thinking, man, the Chargers, with the 6th pick in the draft, I really view them as a long-term quarterback pick right there, Justin Herbert, Jordan Love, whoever. So I don't think it'd be the Chargers before the draft, but I just can't imagine the Jacksonville Jaguars not taking one of those players at a low cost for like a year or two. I mean, why wouldn't you do that? And I don't know which one. I don't have any idea which one they'd be interested in, but they sure seem like the most logical landing spot for one of those two.
And then, I know you mentioned Pittsburgh is a great spot for Jameis. A few weeks ago, you said
Pittsburgh would be fantastic, but I was told last week they have zero interest in Jameis Winston. So, I mean, just because I think it's a good idea, it doesn't necessarily mean they do. The reason it'd be great for him is that I think it'd be great for him to be a backup for a year, get some tough love from Mike Tomlin, bond with those guys, and basically step in on opening day 2021, or maybe even earlier. Ben Roethlisberger has not exactly been the iron horse. All I can say is he obviously needs to cut down the turnovers. We know that. But he's shown quite a lot of promise in every other area on and off the field in the last couple of years. I think he'd be an excellent risk to take if I needed an heir to my quarterback throne.
I just can't believe, and I understand part of Cam's issue, unfortunately for him professionally, and I say that fully knowing what it means for our general world population personally and health-wise, what's going on with the coronavirus preventing him from being seen by doctors potentially is creating his situation. I just can't believe a first overall pick, former MVP. We're just 5 years removed now from his MVP season. Kid's 30. He is still a kid, and a guy who led the league in passing.
But it's so totally unprecedented. Okay, in the last year and a half of football, Cam Newton has first of all, in the first half, in the last half of 2018,
didn't win a game
because of his shoulder. He was lousy. He just was, and he tried to play through it, and he just couldn't do it. Then he has the shoulder surgery. Then he hurts his foot, and he has the foot surgery. So I understand, and I've heard this 1,000 times in the last 2 weeks. Oh my God, Cam Newton just sitting out there. Why aren't teams pouncing on him? This is a different time than anybody has ever gone through in terms of player procurement. how could you devote any significant amount of money right now on your salary cap to a guy who you think is okay and all that? Plus, it's a different kind of quarterback for a lot of teams' systems. He told me last summer that he was ready to go into the second phase in his life. He was going to be a different quarterback. He was going to learn how to play differently. Well, then that got interrupted. So who is he? How is he? What is he? That's the reason why there's not a gold rush for Cam Newton.
Peter, thanks for the time. At Peter_King. Check out everything that Peter does on NBCSports.com, Pro Football Talk as well. Peter, your podcast is also great for folks to listen to and pass the time, certainly, as we're all waiting this thing out. Thanks for the call. Really appreciate it.
Hey, you're welcome, Rich. Great being on with you.
Right back at you. That's Peter King. Nobody like him.